Hi, this is Calvin Cox. It is Wednesday, February 19. The year is 2014, and it's 7:19. Excuse me, it's 7:19 p.m. What I wanted to talk about, this talk didn't come to mind actually solidly till this evening, and the talk is about isolation. Okay, and it actually is critically important because how it plays into the justice system and how prisoners are treated in certain situations, and that if they're treated a certain way, it can have a direct bearing on their internal willingness to fight for their freedom. It's just that simple. If you do something to somebody to smooth out their natural fight ability, then basically you've won over them because you've made them cower. Okay? You've taken away their natural ability to defend themselves, whether it be in a courtroom or fighting someone if necessary. And what I'm saying is that unfortunately for Bradley Manning, he might have done something highly illegal, but the fact of the matter is, the way he was treated before he went to trial was something that I believe was done deliberately to curb his natural ability to defend himself. What I read in the newspaper, as I recall, it was at least 10 months that he was in isolation lockdown. That's pretty severe. And it may have been as much as a year and a half, possibly a wee bit longer than a year and a half. That is an extremely, extremely long time for somebody to be put in isolation. And the truth of the matter is, it has an effect on your mind. My proof of that is there is a fairly well-known college professor who I read an article about. I don't remember his name, but he, in his classrooms, he'll be standing at the board writing stuff, and he'll start talking to himself. And it throws some of the students off because they don't understand what's going on. And they ask him, do you realize you're talking to yourself? And then he stops and he says, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you. I was in prison several years ago, and they put me in isolation for so long that I started to develop this thing where I talk to myself. And he said, if I had not been put in isolation for that many months on end, I would not have developed that. Now, it's a known fact by people who run jails and prisons that if you were to take 100 people and you put them into isolation for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, they begin to go a little bit, I don't want to use the term daffy. Basically, if you take 100 prisoners and do that to them, put them in isolation for 6 months, 9 months, or longer, about 3/4 of them will begin to start to talk to themselves on a, somewhat regular basis. Now, my belief is if 75% of 100 people under those conditions would begin to talk to themselves, then that's not a mental issue, okay, because it would not have occurred had they not been isolated. So it was something that was induced upon them by isolation, not something that would have normally occurred if they had been left in the general population. Okay, some people go even further than that, than talking to themselves. They basically go daffy in the head, and I mean like for good, or severely so, almost for good, really go downhill. So, basically my belief is that Bradley Manning being isolated so much was actually a direct violation of his rights for proper defense and for proper treatment. And I do not, while he was in jail, and I do not believe that that is fair. The treatment that he received was actually fair, and it could have been directly detrimental to his defense. Now, of course, the people who were prosecuting him would deny that to, whatever end ad infinitum from here to eternity. But the fact of the matter is, when you isolate someone that long, I don't even see how that's legal at all. People are just human beings. We're not robots, and we're not little memory systems to be put on a shelf and locked away at will. You need interaction with other people to remain normal, or close to something that's called normal. Simply because that's the way people are hardwired. We're social creatures, and interaction is not only desirable, it's actually very necessary for someone's well-being. And so in the situation with Bradley Manning, you can see how the isolation in a jail cell could have actually been incredibly damaging to him. Now, there's other kind of isolations aside from being in a jail cell or in a prison environment where you're isolated or locked away. The isolation can occur from homelessness and living on the street. And because when you live on the street, you begin to look pretty ratty, and you're probably not well kempt. You're probably not. It's very possible you are not bathing regularly, simply because you have no place to bathe that would be okay to bathe, and because you look perhaps dirty, and you might smell bad. That basically, those two things together don't make you really attractive to, would make a person really attractive to other people. And because of that, people would have a tendency, to stand back a bit. And so that in itself creates a type of isolation, with the homeless. And it's something that if you've ever been homeless, I would say you would definitely notice it. I was homeless for a while, for many years actually, and I definitely noticed it. I would say another kind of isolation is people who actually live in homes, but they're not really very social. Maybe their social skills never were that good, or their social skills as they have gotten older have kind of diminished. Perhaps they don't belong to a church, and they might very well not have any friends, or they don't even have to be close friends. They might not have many friends at all, or who are nearby to them that they can see very often. That kind of isolation is probably actually every bit as bad as the other kinds of being homeless or being in a jail or prison. And it's harmful. It's really very sad, and I don't know if churches have a way of kind of breaking through situations where people are isolated and getting them to come out and getting them to break down their barriers, natural barriers that they would have for whatever reason, and to interact with other people, and thereby, strengthen themselves emotionally. I do know isolation is very damaging. It's very damaging emotionally. I think long-term damage is pretty bad. I think isolation saps a person's natural confidence. And it's just, I guess it's a form of, it disables somebody. And it's just not a good thing. Fortunately, I have a couple of friends that I go to church with every Saturday, and I ride with them, and that's my social day, and I really enjoy that. But I hate to think if they weren't around what I would do. It's kind of crazy. One thing I've definitely noticed is the older you get, if you're not very practiced, and I mean practiced, if you're not very practiced at keeping up your skills at interacting with other people conversationally wise, and you practice that regularly, if you end up in a situation where some friends move away or something happens, you're kind of by yourself. You have to pick up the pieces and continue to move forward and develop new friendships. But what I have found, my perception is, and this is just my perception, that the older you get, the seems to be the harder it is to develop new friendships. It seems like the older you get, more caution barriers go up. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I perceive that's what happens. Not with everybody, but can happen. And so that can lead to situational dynamics where friends move, or you have to move to a new location for some reason. And all of a sudden you don't have your standard friends for support. What do? It could get difficult, could get pretty lonely. And isolation is not something that needs to be studied further. What it needs to be done is remedied. The jail and prison systems need to try to remedy the detrimental sides of isolation, reduce isolation. In the case of Bradley Manning, I think they way overdid it and basically abused his rights, period. And that could have affected his willingness and ability to fight to defend himself, which I think would be hugely illegal. Those kind of situations need to be stopped. And as far as homelessness, one thing with homeless people is figuring out a way for them to be able to shower at least every 2 to 3 days in a safe environment, and wash their clothes and dry them and get dressed again back with clean smelling clothes that are clean and dry. And the reason I say that is, if you're a homeless person and it's the middle of winter and you're walking around, when you walk around, your body sweats naturally. So what happens is, over the course of a day or a day and a half, if you got to walk all day long, your clothes are impregnated with sweat, and they don't insulate you anymore. Okay, And of course, then the bacteria starts building up and the odor starts building up. And next thing you know, it's a very unpleasant situation. So, finding some way to allow homeless people to shower regular and put on clean clothes so they at least have some chance of decreasing the natural standoff isolation from other people. I think it's critical for homeless people to at least try to remain integrated with wherever they live and things about them. I think that's really important. And then dealing with the isolation of individuals who do live in homes and have just gotten old and withdrawn into themselves. That it would be really nice if churches would come up with something really creative. I know there's a lot of creative people in a lot of churches that are just really good at doing fun things and figuring out ways of doing things that would draw people out into a church where they could interact with other people. It doesn't have to be a church. It could be at a community center. It could be at a park. It could be at a monument downtown. It could be a lot of different things. You could have society interaction days, once a month or once every 6 weeks or something like that. Maybe every 2 weeks. I don't know, but it would really help some of the people who feel isolated and probably might not know just what to do about their situation. Anyway, thanks.